Hello and welcome to our very first virtual cafe, where we're going to take a look at feedback at Dulwich Hamlet Junior School, particularly in the light of the current school closure. And this is really in response to the survey that we sent out about Google Classroom and how children were using it. So my name's Tom Salomonson, I'm an assistant head.
And I'm Rachel Evans and I'm one of the other assistant heads.
So we thought it would be a good idea to start off with explaining a little bit about how we feedback at school.
So most of our feedback at school is oral feedback. That could be from the teacher, from another adult in the classroom, or indeed between the children themselves. We don't do very much written feedback in school at all. It's all about a two-way discussion between the adults and the children, or between the children themselves, so that they can reflect upon the work that they've done and make changes to it in the light of the discussion.
Yeah, it's also action. So we like to get the children to actually make changes there and then to the work that they're doing. They often do this in green pen if it's a writing activity, and we will pick one, the most important bit of feedback to feedback on, so they don't feel overwhelmed. So it might be one spelling that's a particularly common spelling error, or it might be perhaps looking at commas and their use of commas, rather than picking up on every single mistake.
The feedback is also immediate. We like to do it as we go along so that the children don't embed their misconceptions. If they keep practicing something that's wrong, then that wrong misunderstanding will be embedded within their brains and they'll get it wrong next time. So we give them feedback right then and there as they're doing their work, so that we can pick up on any errors and misconceptions and try to ensure that they don't do it again.
So the way we feedback now is very different from what maybe happened a few years ago, where there was a lot of written red ink at the bottom of each piece of work, and there was a big distance between the child actually completing the work and the teacher feeding back and then giving that back to the child. And the reason why we do that
is that a couple of years ago we took part in a study run by the London South Teaching School Alliance, where one of our Year 5 classes worked for a term with verbal feedback only, and the teacher didn't do any writing in their books whatsoever. This was a really big change for us as a school, as we'd done quite a lot of work on how we gave our written feedback to the children and trying to provide them with time to respond to that feedback. What we found through this study was that the children who had verbal feedback only actually made more progress than the children who were getting the traditional written feedback, and that they liked it a great deal more than having written feedback in their book. They really appreciated the opportunity to discuss the changes that they needed to make to their work, and to have conferences with their teacher, and to talk things through with their friends and the people that they were working with in the class. And it had a really large impact on the work that they were doing and on their ability to reflect upon what they needed to do to progress. As a school, we are very keen to ensure that the children have the ability to critically evaluate their own work and learn the skills that they're going to need to make them successful adults. So this was really helpful in ensuring that we could make feedback much more productive and helpful for the children. So once the study was completed, as a school, we decided to take most of these points on board. We do still sometimes write things in their book, but it's quite rare. We rely a lot more on the children talking to each other, talking to us, as we've said, and making those changes in the moment and enabling them to develop their skills to look at their work and spot their own errors, spot their mistakes, and spot the ways that they need to improve.
And secondly, we follow educational research. Dylan William, who I've put the quote here from, is probably one of the most authoritative voices in education on feedback. And his current thinking is very much that we have to be careful not to tell children what they should have done after they've already done it, but instead to create a recipe for future action that children can actually action in their next piece of work. So that brings us on to what our approach is during school closure, and obviously we're learning as we go along, and things are quite difficult at the moment because we're kind of refining how do we take these principles and move them onto an online platform. So in maths, we've provided the answers, and like Mrs. Evans said before, that's actually quite close to classroom practice. In the classroom, we might provide the answers right at the very start, or we might, after a couple of questions, we might supply those answers. So those answers are on there, and it's either if your child is independent enough, they could be checking after every question. If they're less independent and you want to, you need to get on with working from home, then that might be something you do as soon as they're finished. Spend 10 minutes going through those answers, and it's really important that those misconceptions are spotted as soon as possible, because practice makes permanent, and if you practice it wrong, you're making the wrong permanent.
For the reading tasks, some of those questions work in the same way as the maths. So if they're a very short answer question, the questions that maybe require just one word or to tick a box, then the answers are there and they're able to find out whether they have got the correct answer right then and there whilst they're doing the work. Some of the questions in reading are a bit longer and they will work more along the lines of the writing. It's not always possible to give a completely 100% this is the right answer for the longer questions in reading, particularly as the children progress up through the school in years 5 and 6. And those are the sort of questions that the teachers will be reviewing and looking at and seeing how the class as a whole have done, and putting into the whole class feedback some of the common errors that were made. Maybe the question, people didn't answer the question at great enough length, maybe they didn't use the textual evidence carefully enough, and those are the things that will come up in the whole class feedback in terms of the reading.
And in terms of writing, it's very similar. The whole class feedback is a much more efficient way of using the teacher's time, because what we will do in class is we will read through all of the writing, and instead of making comments in each child's book, we will then group the children based on the most prescient bit of feedback that we need to give to each group. Sometimes the group is the whole class because everybody needs to do the same thing. Other times it might be groups of 6 children who the teacher can sit with and explain. So we take the view at the moment that all children will benefit from seeing what has gone well, so some examples of what was particularly successful from that piece of writing, and those pitfalls that children need to look out for.
We're ready to know that we are listening to your feedback. We've read through all of your responses to the Google survey, and it's really helpful for us. We're continuing with our professional development whilst the school is shut, and we want to make our offering as effective as we possibly can in these incredibly difficult circumstances.
So you might notice that teachers are beginning to use more videos to feedback. That way we can get that kind of oral one-to-one feel with the class to give that feedback. One of the problems that we do have, though, is that every teacher has the same technological difficulties as you're having at home. We have our staff have a huge variety of access to the internet, quality of internet, different devices at home to kind of do these things, and level of kind of confidence as well. So bear with us as we improve that kind of video feedback offer.
We are looking at how we can provide a little bit more individual feedback, particularly on some of the writing tasks. As we've said, it's not particularly effective to write a great number of comments on a child's individual piece of work. However, we do recognise that children really like to see that we've read it and that we've acknowledged that we're looking at the work that they've done. So we will be, over the next few weeks, giving some pieces of individual feedback on some of the tasks that the children are doing.
And the final point is that, as a staff body, we take continuous professional development very seriously, and We are continuing with our staff meetings despite social distancing online, and we are learning from best practice of other schools and best practice within the school as well. So we're looking at what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well, and trying to learn from that. So hopefully you'll see that the offer online improves over time.
So how can you help to support your child whilst the school is shut? We obviously can't give them that one-to-one discussion and feedback that we really value in school. So you are going to have to help us out to make the feedback as effective as it can possibly be. The first and probably most important thing is praise your children for all the incredible work that they're doing. We look at the work and we can see how much effort they're putting in, so give them that praise and in the moment feedback. As Mr. Simonson said, we don't pick up on everything in a piece of work because it can be overwhelming, so just pick one thing that you think that your child really needs to change and improve to move forward in their work.
I think it would be, if we go down to the second point here in green, it'd be really useful if you could actually spend some time sitting with your child with those whole class feedback posts, particularly when they're written, and just read that out to your child and actually look at how does that apply to their piece of work.
You can PM your teacher with specific questions. We know that some of the children have been doing that, but please do encourage your child if there's something that they don't understand or something that they'd like a little bit of support with. The teachers do look at those every day, and if your child PMs before 12 o'clock, they should receive an answer pretty quickly.
I think we've spoken about the importance of picking up mathematical errors, and if they can start to be sufficient with that, so actually before they look at the answers, have they done an estimate to check? Maybe they've used the inverse, maybe they've checked back with the original question to check their answer makes sense, or looked at a different method to get to the same one. And I think as well, the whole class feedback, as some of you are saying, is once the task is gone, it's not all that useful. So what teachers will do is we'll often time our whole class feedback to coincide with the next piece of work. So actually they can then use that feedback in their next piece of work. So that could be quite helpful for you to remind, oh, remember when your teacher said that you needed to look at the use of commas, you can actually do that in this task.
And lastly, if you can try to submit the English and Maths on time, then your child's work will be part of the whole class feedback. Obviously, the teachers look at it at the end of the day and they can only look at the work that has been submitted. We recognise that that's not always possible, and that depending on your home situation, it can't always happen, but obviously if your work is there, it will be part of the whole class feedback. So that would be really helpful.
Well, congratulations, you made it to the end of our first ever virtual cafe. Thank you if you stuck with us. Thank you so much for all of your support, kind comments, and for supporting the children. We feel like we're going to be in a really good place in terms of children coming back, not having missed vast swathes of their learning. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you in person in the near future, hopefully. Bye.